If you work with silicone molds a lot for your epoxy project, you know that having a matching router template for that mold is very handy. There are a lot of uses for the templates, but most importantly, you can use it to perfectly match the lumber that you're using to fit the mold precisely. I've got this new 18-inch round silicone mold from Upstart Epoxy, but I don't have a matching template for it. I'm Josh with JC Woodworks, and today I'm going to show you how to solve that problem. So the first thing that you need to do is make sure that you have a level surface, because you're going to be pouring epoxy into this mold. I have a piece of melamine that I use often. It just makes it easier for me to level the surface and then put my mold on top of this piece. I know that my work surface here is not perfectly level, so I use this and some makeshift shims, and then that's how I do it. So I've worked with this particular piece often enough that I kind of know where to start with my leveling and some of the pieces, and then I'll just kind of get it right from there. So you want to make sure that you're level this way and this way. It doesn't hurt to check all the different angles. So I know that this side needs to come up just a little bit, so I'll just take some playing cards and just slide it under here. See if I can get it level. It's important that you get this part right, because when you put your mold on here, what we're ultimately going to do is pour deep pour epoxy into there. And if your mold is not level, then it's going to be thicker on one side than on the other. So you really want to get this as perfect as you can. Okay, so I have it leveled this way. Now I'm going to check this way. That's level. I'll just go back and just recheck that. Check different angles. There we go. Now we have a surface that's ready to pour. Now all you're going to do is take your mold and place it on top of here. Now this is going to be a clear pour, but I'm not really worried about it being completely clear, you know, like you would in a normal epoxy pour. It's going to be a template used in my shop and on my router, so I'm not worried about how crystal clear this is. I'm really not even that worried about bubbles. So now we just need to mix up our epoxy. I like to use Upstart Epoxy, and today we're going to be using their deep pour resin. Now you could potentially use the tabletop resin for this, but they don't recommend that you use tabletop epoxy for any pours greater than 1/8 of an inch. So we want to do this template, I want to do it about 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to use deep pour resin. It takes longer for it to cure, about 72 hours versus the 24 hours for the tabletop, but that's fine. What I love about Upstart Epoxy's resin is it's so simple to use. It's very user friendly, but it's also good for advanced users because it's great quality. Their deep pour is only 2 parts, part A and part B, at a 2-to-1 ratio. In order to determine how much resin you're going to need for this, for any mold that you do, you need to determine the volume. Upstart Epoxy mixes their resin by volume instead of by weight. So the first thing we need to do is determine the amount of volume that we need to pour. The great thing about Upstart Epoxy is they have on their website, they have a resin calculator. Go to their website, find their resin calculator, and it's simple. You enter the length and the width of your project, and it spits out the volume that you want. And then I'll show you a quick little easy way to convert that volume into the number of ounces that you're going to need. For this, I don't really have a length and a width. I really have more of a diameter, but just for these purposes, I'm going to just put in 18 by 18 since it's an 18-inch round mold. You'll see down here it spits out 81 as the volume. And so what we're going to do is convert this. So you go to your calculator, 81 divided by 1.8, and that gives you 45 ounces. Whenever it spits out ounces, you need to kind of figure out, okay, I need to divide this by 3 in a pretty equal way, because it's a 2-to-1 pour. You could do 15, 15, and 15. That gives you 45. But I also like to usually do just a little bit more. And on my mixing cup, I don't have a 15 mark. I could probably guess. But the thing with resin is you really want to be pretty precise with your mix ratios, because that could really alter how it cures. But I do have a 16 and a 32 and a 48. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour 48 ounces. I'll pour 16 ounces of the hardener and then 32 ounces of the resin. Upstart Epoxy's resin advertises very little to no VOCs, the harmful fumes, but yes, it's a chemical. There are still harmful fumes. I'm in a well-ventilated shop. I've got an air filtration system going as well. HVAC down here, it's well ventilated. I'm going to wear my gloves, my eye protection, and I'm not going to stand over top of my mixing cup and start huffing all of this resin, so we'll be fine. It's really important when you're mixing your resin that you mix it thoroughly. If it doesn't mix correctly, again, that will affect the outcome of the project. I'm just using a paint stick. You want to make sure that it's clean, free of any dust or debris. You don't want to whip it, you just want to stir it. You don't have to go super slow, but you don't want to go super fast. The faster you go and the more violent you are with the stirring, the more bubbles you're going to introduce into the resin. Now, yes, I could use a mixer on a drill, but again, that introduces a lot more bubbles. Typically, you want to mix about 3 minutes. You want to make sure that you're scraping the bottoms and the sides. Every once in a while, make sure you go around the sides, because that resin will stick to the sides and it'll cause it not to mix correctly. 3 minutes is just a recommendation. It's not a hard count, so to speak. Usually you can look in here and tell as you're mixing. Sometimes you can see little striations. It'll get more clear as you mix it. And sometimes it'll fool you though. It'll be nice and clear, but when you scrape the sides, you'll get some little striations in there, and that's when you know you need to keep on mixing. Usually, when I think I'm good and properly mixed, I'll go a little bit longer, maybe 30 seconds longer, just to make sure. Time to pour. So let me just say, I am by no means an expert. I am a self-taught woodworker, especially with the epoxy projects. I've only been working with epoxy for maybe 2 or 3 years, and I still learn as I go, and I still make mistakes. Now, as I'm looking at this, I'm wondering if I told you wrong about measuring diameter. I think I've got enough, but we'll see. If not, no worries. I'll just mix up a little bit more. It's not that big of a deal. But never be afraid to make mistakes, because we all make them. All right, let's pour this thing and let's just see what we got. Just going to use a little stick to kind of see about how deep I am. I'm at about 1/4 inch. All right, looks like we're good. So now we just wait about 72 hours and we'll come back and check it. It's been 3 days and now it's time to demold this router template. And there it is. There are some bubbles in here. Obviously, that's never happened to me before with this certain epoxy. The only thing I can really attribute it to is this is deep pour, so it's meant for thicker pours, and this is just right at probably 1/4 inch. A couple of things probably happened here. I didn't come back and with heat and pop bubbles probably like I should have, mainly because it's a router template. I'm not that concerned. Second thing, because it wasn't a lot of volume, it may have cured a little bit faster than normal. Maybe didn't have time for the bubbles to come up. I don't know. Again, I'm not that concerned about it. It's a template. Now, Before we can use this, there's one more step that we probably should do. On the edges here, it rises up a little bit. And that happens in these molds like this, where the resin kind of forms up against the wall of the mold. Not a big deal. It can be pretty sharp. It's easy to take care of. I just use a deburring tool and just go along the edges. And that just helps to soften that up. I'm not looking for it to be perfect. I'm just looking to soften up the edges so that it's not so sharp. All right, so there you go. We've got a perfectly formed router template that matches this 18-inch silicone mold. And so now, when we're ready for our next project, we want to include some lumber or some wood. All you have to do is simply attach this with some double-sided tape or the CA glue and tape method, hot glue, whatever. But basically you attach this to the wood and use a flush trim router bit to trim the lumber and then exactly match this mold. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, and I'm going to show you in some upcoming videos how we're going to use this template. See you there.
Okay, let's go.